Stories of Great Christians.
From its radio studios in Chicago, the Moody Bible Institute greets its friends everywhere with Chapter 23 in the transcribed story of Florence Nightingale, the Lady with the Lamp.
There was a fatal flaw in my instructions. Although the War Office intended that I should superintend all of the women nurses in the army hospitals, my instructions stated that I was director of the women's nursing establishment in Turkey. My bitter opponent, Dr. Hall, loftily construed this to mean that I had no business in the Crimea. He used this as an excuse to block my efforts to put an end to waste, extravagance, and inefficiency in the Crimean hospitals. I wrote to acquaintances begging them to intervene in order to clear up this point and settle the question of my authority once for all. But I seemed to be making no progress along this line when help suddenly came from an unexpected quarter. The Secretary for War, Lord Panmure, had sent Colonel Lefroy to investigate conditions in the field. Returning, Colonel Lefroy made his report to Panmure.
Of course, I visited Miss Nightingale also.
And you found?
That this excellent lady has been the mainstay of the army hospitals during all of the winter months.
There have been other reports to that effect. You think it's true, then?
Beyond doubt. And she'd do still more if she weren't hampered by the Army's chief medical officer.
You mean Dr. Hall?
He's done all he could to make things difficult and even impossible for Miss Nightingale. He pretends, for instance, that she has no authority outside of Turkey. And with this feeble excuse, he encourages some of the more rebellious women to openly flout the lady's authority.
We'll have to do something about that. Question is, of course, what?
Well, in view of Miss Nightingale's record, I think nothing will do short of defining her position clearly in general orders.
Oh, general orders, that's rather drastic. You know that every officer gets a copy, and they're posted in all of the barracks and mess halls.
I'm quite aware of that. And nothing else would be so effective in putting an end to the senseless and petty persecutions that she's had to endure.
And that would amount to a censure of Dr. Hall, too, you know.
Well, even so, it needs to be done.
Well, I'm forced to admire Miss Nightingale, but I'll have to think a while before taking so drastic a step.
Within a week, the notice appeared in every officer's mail and was posted in the army buildings for all to read. It said that I was head of the women's nursing establishment for all army hospitals. It said furthermore that no officer was to remove a nurse, transfer a nurse, or in any way intervene in the affairs of the nurses without first consulting me. It was more ground than I'd ever dreamed of gaining. It was victory. Although Dr. Hall continued to invent small annoyances, he was defeated. In December, Queen Victoria sent me an enormous diamond-studded brooch as a mark of her esteem. I was especially grateful because it gave me an opportunity to write directly to that royal lady about a matter much closer to my heart than diamond brooches. I truly thank you from my heart for your kindness. Knowing your concern for the troops, I presume to add a few words about the men. If they had an opportunity to do so, I know the soldiers would send money home to their families. As is, they spend it on drink. Some are brought in dead drunk, and I mean literally dead, since they die from it. I've been receiving money from the men in my office twice a week here in the hospital. They entrust me with more than £1,000 a month. That ought to be a method whereby men not in the hospitals could send their money home through the post.
Yes, Your Majesty.
I have here a letter from Miss Nightingale. I suppose you know that Palmerston, the Prime Minister, Clarendon, the Foreign Secretary, and Palmure, the Secretary for War, are meeting right now. I have here a letter that all three of those weather gentlemen should be deeply interested in.
Yes, Your Majesty.
I want you to take this letter to them and tell them that I personally and strongly approve of everything in it.
Certainly. I'll take it right away, Your Majesty.
You've heard the letter, gentlemen. What do you think of it?
Well, Palmerston,
Yes, Palmure.
as Secretary of War, I've heard a great many of Miss Nightingale's ideas. In the field of nursing, I think her ideas are excellent.
You think this is not her field?
Mr. Palmerston, I think she's better qualified to talk about other things. I've heard it said that she has very elevated ideas about the British soldier.
What's your opinion, Clarendon?
Oh, well, I like the letter. I thought it was full of real stuff.
I detected a note of downright practicality myself. You will have to admit it's better for the men to send money home than to spend it on drink.
That's obvious. But if the men really wanted to send money home, they could do it through their paymaster.
And then why don't they?
And I don't know exactly. They seem to have suspicions about doing it that way.
What sort of suspicions? Are the paymasters dishonest?
Oh, I don't think so. They're overworked, like every other official in the army. If there's any dishonesty, I couldn't find it out without conducting an investigation.
Well, they're not going to use the official method now in force, that's evident. Why don't we let them use the post, as Miss Nightingale suggests?
Well, I'm quite willing. I offer no objections to putting in post offices for them to use. I only wonder if they'll really use them after they're established.
So the post offices were made available, and with all due deference to the War Secretary, money orders began to flow out of Constantinople, Scutari, Balaclava, and Sebastopol. In all, £71,000 sterling was sent home in less than 6 months. Money saved from the dram shop and used to build homes instead. For some time I'd been concerned for those soldiers who became well enough to walk around, but were still too weak to return to active service. I went to Lord Pawlett with some ideas.
Yes, I know those men have lots of idle time on their hands, but what do you think we can do about it?
Oh, a number of things, I should think. We might establish reading rooms, for example.
Reading rooms? What do you mean?
Well, we could build a room, say, in the courtyard of the Berwick Hospital or some other convenient place. Put armchairs and desks in it, and then the men could go there to read or write.
And the bar? You're leaving out the first essential for making your reading room popular, Miss Nightingale.
I don't think you're quite fair to the men, sir. Well, they're right when you say they all go directly to taverns when they're released from the hospitals. But would they if they had some other place to go?
They wouldn't go any other place if they could.
Well, I'm not sure they wouldn't. At least we should give them a chance. If we provided a place for them to write their families and read books and divert themselves in a quiet way, I think a great many of them would stay away from bars altogether.
My dear lady, I'm afraid you have a very exalted opinion of the British soldier. Don't you know that these men are notorious for their drunkenness and disorder?
It's a reputation they don't rightly deserve. I have great respect for the soldier as a class.
And on what do you base your opinion? Their manners and habits?
I worked with the manufacturing and agricultural classes in London before coming here. And as a class, I find the army lots more helpful and teachable than any other group.
They put on a good front for you, Miss Nightingale, but they're not so angelic as you suppose.
I don't think I imagine that they're angels. At least not all of them. Some drink habitually and some of them are faithless, but by and large they're good, honest, and decent.
Good, honest, and decent. What a description for the professional soldier.
I could add a few other adjectives to that, too. The British soldier has one respect for himself, it seems to me.
You seem very warm in your defense, ma'am.
Say what you like about the soldiers. They advance bravely under fire, and the shilling a day the government pays them could never be what inspires them to do it.
Well, there I can't argue. They have fought well in this scrap, at times heroically.
And the way they'll die to save a comrade's life, do you attribute that to their lack of character?
I surrender. I'm cornered and forced to admit that the British soldier is manly and courageous.
Then you'll consider the reading rooms.
Now, let's not jump to hasty conclusions. I confessed only to the bravery of the men. I didn't say we were going to destroy discipline by making gentlemen of leisure of them.
But a little reading won't make a man.
As far as reading goes, quite a number of them won't read simply because they can't. They've never learned.
Well, then in that case, it's our Christian duty to engage schoolmasters to teach them.
Engage schoolmasters? That's the most impossible of all. I simply can't go along with your ideas, Miss Nightingale. You just don't understand the army.
I can't help thinking that
if I let you go ahead with that sort of project, what would happen? In no time you'd be spoiling the brutes, and I'd have no fighting man left.
I could do nothing with Lord Paulet. But when he was mercifully replaced by General Storks, I found things entirely different.
I called you, Miss Nightingale, to get your ideas about my plans. I call it the Curfew and Patrol plan.
Curfew and Patrol? What's that?
Well, I'm thinking of closing up the drink shops and putting lights near all of the hospitals, here and around the surrounding neighborhood. At a certain hour, the streets can be ordered cleared, and after that, a patrol could see that they were kept that way.
Why, General, that's a splendid idea.
I don't see why a great deal can't be done to cut down on the drunkenness and disorder in this place.
I don't know whether you've heard my points of view on that subject or not, but believe me, I'm in full accord.
If only there was something for the men to do.
Well, that's what I've been thinking. I'm for opening a reading room or a coffee shop.
Or a sort of combination of the two.
Friends have already written from England offering games and maps and pictures.
Oh, wonderful. We'll fit a place up with armchairs and a few writing tables.
And I'll furnish the pens and writing paper myself. People have told me that the soldiers would steal the paper and sell it for drink, but I can't believe it.
Oh, I'm all for giving them a good chance to prove themselves. And I think they will, too.
General, I know they will. In September, a large recreation room called the Inkerman Cafe was opened between the two hospitals. The men sat there reading and writing letters, and the place was as silent as a library of the British Museum. With a little encouragement, the men organized an amateur theatre and formed singing classes. Though the whole of the cavalry was sent to winter with us to Scutari, the population was always perfectly orderly. An incredible achievement.
And so we conclude Chapter 23 in the transcribed story of Florence Nightingale, The Lady with the Lamb. This is another in the series of stories of great Christians, which come to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.